Okay, so tonight, here we are tonight, our June 29th live Q&A. We certainly want to, this is our last chance to talk about Chapter 3 things. So I just got a couple lists to look at. This first one is just what, the 6 lessons we had. Actually, there's supposed to be 7, aren't there? What did I miss? Anyway, the lessons, and then don't forget about the presentation, Thinking God's Thoughts. Then I've got a list of terms, and I thought I'd put this up and see, hopefully this looks familiar. This is me just collecting important terms with some of their symbols behind them. And wanted to see, I only got one person in here, but I wanted to see if anybody wanted to ask questions, maybe go through any of those. I mean, they'll come up in questions about the practice test anyway, but I just thought this would be another way to start the discussion. So let's just, so Garrett, any of those listed terms that you'd like to maybe discuss, get into a little bit more? Yep, take your time. By the way, I think they're on, if you go to the review link on the website, you can get all these pages. So don't feel like you have to copy everything down tonight, but if you want to write them down, that's fine too. Yeah, sufficient to necessary. Sure, I'll talk about that. I'm going to write it on the side of the screen here, and then I'll erase it later. But for these two, let me change my color here. Yeah, for these two, if I use this example, if A, then B. So these two relate to an if-then statement. So just for my example, if A, then B. A is sufficient for B. Let me write that down. A, I gotta get rid of my keyboard. Whoop. I gotta get rid of my keyboard here so I can write more easily. So A is sufficient for B, and B is necessary for A. So in other words, I just remember it this way. In an if-then statement, the first statement is sufficient, and the end one is necessary. Let me give you an example. So if a student gets a 3.0 or above, then they will be on the honor roll. Okay, that means getting a 3.0 is sufficient for getting on the honor roll. And being on the honor roll is necessary if you have a 3.0 or above GPA. So the if part is enough or sufficient for the result of B, and the result is absolutely necessary once you meet the condition A. I don't know, hopefully that makes some sense. So that's the sufficient, necessary. So maybe we'll, let me show you this next slide. Some more, this is just symbols alone. I thought it would be good. I just make sure to do, are you fluent with all of these symbols? I think you probably are. And is the top one. Yep, exactly. Or, yep. And which or is that one, Garrett? Just remember that V is the inclusive or. Okay, and then the next one, that's what, the exclusive or? Yep. And then we have the conditional or if-then statement. The one with the arrow on both ends, that's the biconditional. I'm sorry, I'll let you go. Yep, very good. Do you remember this next one? No, because this one here is equivalent. What about this one? I like your It's a lot of typing. Anyway, no, it's the symbol for implies. So the verb, so if you wrote like A and then that arrow B, that reads A implies B. So if you use the noun form, that's the symbol for implication. Yeah, there's a lot of these. I mean, all of these look an awful lot alike. So you really have to be careful. Yeah, example. Okay, well, let me tell you what's an implication is not quick to give an example, but here, just a reminder, an implication is an if-then statement that turns out to a tautology. So in other words, if you had an if P then Q statement, and for whatever reason, the final result came out to all truths, then P implies Q. So it's like an extremely well-behaving if-then statement. And it gets awarded with an extra stripe. Instead of just the if-then like you see on the top here, it kind of earns an extra stripe and gets two horizontal. It's kind of like being promoted to sergeant. Yeah, for all truths, right. So this symbol can only be used in special cases. You probably recognize everything else on the page, right, from symbols? What's opposites? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, you mean the negation on the bottom? Yeah, this is what? A complement? A complement? Is that what you were referring to? Okay. And then you recognize that symbol when it comes up in an argument? That's just a shortcut for therefore. Okay. Another list I'd like to just take a little look, or not, I don't know if I'd call it a list, but an important slide is make sure you remember De Morgan's law. I'm going to take the pictures out of there. De Morgan's law. Remember, we used it in what? We used it in sets, and then we found out it works exactly the same way in logic. So remember, in sets, this and sign was an upside down horseshoe. Instead of sharp, they were, yeah. So anyway, De Morgan's law, I'll just warn you ahead of time. That's definitely going to be on the test. So you want to make sure you're familiar with that. So if I ask you to negate an and, like you see right here. So if I asked you to negate an A and B, notice we put the negation on the A and the negation on the B, but look at, here's the important thing that most people forget. You have to invert. Yeah, you have to invert that, that and sign now becomes an or the or sign now becomes an and. Students have a tendency to forget that. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have the statement, it is humid and it is Thursday. What's the negation of that? It is not humid or it is not Thursday. Notice that and got changed to an or. Yeah, it's not humid, or it is, yeah, you got it right, or it is not Thursday. Yeah. So anyway, the important thing is students have a tendency to not put that or in there. They'll leave it as an and. So just keep your mind, remember that. So that's probably going to come up if I ask you to negate something. De Morgan, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be on the test and more than one time. The ones at the bottom below the line, I'm not sure you have to have memorized, but these are also things that we learned. So if you negate both if you take an if then, like if A then B, and you flip it around and you negate them both, so if not B then not A, do you remember that's called a contrapositive? So let me get a different color here. So in green, that is the contrapositive of if A then B. And the contrapositive is always the equivalent of the original. So you'll get exactly the same truth table for those two. So good old contrapositive. Then this is from that hint. The second one was from that hint on page 165. And what's cool about it is it allows you to change what? An or statement into an if-then statement. So when you want to get a chain reaction, and you need to have all if-thens. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then this one down here is, remember, this symbol was not in the book, this circle with a cross in it, the exclusive or. And what I'm just reminding you of here is that's the negation. That's exactly the opposite of the biconditional. So remember, this rule was what? Only true if they're different. And this one is only true if they're alike. So it makes sense that they're opposites of each other. So I don't know, this one's a little bit on the trivial side, but it could turn out to be important for you on the bottom there. I would say these two, you should definitely know, those top two. And you definitely need to know De Morgan. Garrett, here's an example of the implication. So here was a problem, this on the top, if P then Q and P. And you're supposed to, in the beginning, you were supposed to, you just do it this way. This is the problem that was given with an if then. And when we got all done, the final result was a tautology, as you can see circled in red. And because it was an if-then statement and turned out to be a tautology, play the horns, da-da-da-da-da, therefore, we can say that first thing, that if part, implies the second, and it gets awarded the second. So this is just an example of that implication we were talking about before. Okay, so I've been yapping already for 15 minutes. So now what I'd really love to do tonight is take your questions. Go if you want to talk about the practice test, that would be awesome. But anything you want to ask about, I'll do my best to clear it up for you. So for some of you just picking up the video now, I just want to let you know what's going on. We went through some terms, some symbols, and some of the lesson titles, just some basics. And we're kind of getting ready for any student questions on the practice test or any topic in Chapter 3 as we try to do our best to get ready for the test on Chapter 3. So Garrett, maybe just to get ready, what I'm going to do is move over. You don't have to ask chapter test questions, but I'm going to move over and just show the first page of the chapter test in the book, at least the beginning of it. So I was very happy to hear that you were working on that, because that is definitely the way to get ready for this test. I wouldn't call, so to answer your question, are there any tricks to learning how to write negations? De Morgan's law, I wouldn't call it a trick, but you definitely need to know De Morgan's law. So if I ask you, like, for example, look at the one right on this page up here. Number three right here is already, they're checking to see, does this guy know De Morgan? Well, that maybe that's not, I'm sorry, that's not it. But yeah, here, number 10. If you don't know De Morgan, you wouldn't know how to do this one right here. And part B, what happens when you negate that? You negate the P You negate the not Q and it becomes a regular Q, and you change the and to an or. So that becomes actually not P or Q. So you know, that's not a trick. Oh, that's not a trick, but you definitely need to Morgan. Here's another one, Garrett, in answer to your excellent question. It doesn't exactly fit on this page, but I've got some space here, so I'm going to write it. What's the negation of if P then Q? So here's I mean, we haven't really talked about that, but well, we have, but not directly. When is the only time an if then is false? When the first part is true and the second part is false. So in other words, P and not Q. So I don't know. So here's one. That's one that I guess you might call a little bit tricky. So anyway, that doesn't really fit by that question, but I had some white space there, and I thought try answering your question about learning how to write negations. Oh, I see. You're relating to my number 10. Okay. But lose all sense of what I know when sentences are used. Okay. You just treat, you know, like if I said to you, if it rains, then the sidewalk gets wet. So in that case, my P is it rains, and my Q is the sidewalk gets wet. What's the negation of that? It rains and the sidewalk doesn't get wet. So I mean, that shouldn't be that tricky. So P just is whatever, you know, like if I tell you P stands for Jill is an honor student, and Q stands for, I don't know, Jack is the teacher. Really, you're just kind of substituting Jill is an honor student for wherever you see the letter P. Okay, so I'm commenting on your text now. I get the formulas. So turn an if then into a P. Yeah, if then is P arrow Q. Yeah, so that really what that comes back to, Garrett, is way back in the beginning. What does that left to right arrow mean? It means if P then Q. Yeah. So you need to get real familiar with those symbols. So if you see a sentence like if it rains, then the sidewalk gets wet, you know that you have an arrow statement. Sounds like you just need to get a little more comfortable with the symbols. And again, if you want, we can look at some of the examples from the practice test. Maybe not. I mean, here, like here. Let's look at number 6, Garrett. It says write the negation of each of the following statements. If Joey does not study, he will fail the course. Okay. So, I don't know, we got to come up with a symbol. What should we call if Joey does not study? How about not study, not S? If Joey does not study, notice there's no then, but isn't it implied? Then he will fail the course. So that's the original statement. So what's the negation? The negation is keep the first part the same and negate the second. So what's the negation of that? He will not study and he will not fail. Sorry, that symbol didn't come out very good. Whoa. So do you see, all I did was the same technique we used over here to negate an if-then, keep the first part true and make the second part the opposite. Part B, if Sally studies hard, I'll say SH, if Sally studies hard, she will make an A in the course. What's the negation of that? She studies hard and she does not make an A. So number 6 definitely relates to this hint we were talking about in the bottom left of the screen. Yeah, that's simple. So the words shouldn't really make it harder. It's just a substitute for the letters. Yeah, well, you probably are just overthinking. Yeah, you know, you want to think of it more based on the rules and don't use your common sense. Okay, I mean, just use the rules that I taught you. And part of the problem here is English is, to be honest, English is kind of a messed up language. I mean, I like it. It's my language. But it's not very precise. And so, you know, there's and one of the beauties of the language is there are many ways to say the same thing. And so it's more of a problem with the language than it is with logic. Logic is, wow, know your rules, you're up and running. Yeah, actually, you know, what you and I are doing here, having this discussion. And by the way, those of you watching the video, if you're wondering why I'm talking to air, you are probably not seeing the group. You are not seeing the group chat window. And at the moment, I am having a discussion using the person on the other end is using a chat. And so, well, if this doesn't make sense to you, there are what? I think 4 or 5 other review videos up on the website. So you do have other options. And if you are still thinking about joining us, hey, we're only at 7:28. Come on in. Speak up. Yeah, number 20 on the practice test, you bet. Okay, that would be on this page. Yeah, there's number 20. Okay, now I'm going to go to a page on that. Okay. So number 20. I've got it copied on the top there. Use an Euler diagram to check the validity of the following argument. Now, I had to translate this. No loafers. Now, here's where English gets in the way. Okay? No loafers work hard. I translate it as, if you're a loafer, then you don't work hard. And to me, that's a more straightforward way of saying it. And Sally does not work hard, so not work hard. Now, the conclusion is Sally is a loafer. So what I wrote there on the right side, that's the argument in symbols. We still don't know if it's valid or not. Now, the problem said use an Euler diagram to check it. So do you see why I drew the L circle separate from the W circle? Because it says, if you're a loafer, then you're not a hard worker. So the loafer and the hard work circles are what? Totally with. And then the second part says Sally does not work hard. So you know what? I'm going to erase the Let me erase that X. Okay, if Sally doesn't work hard, then where is she? Well, Sally could be what? Here? She could be here. She might be there. She can be anything outside of the work circle. So now, what do you think about the conclusion? Is she guaranteed to be an L, to be a loafer? No, she could be one of these two also. So that's why I wrote invalid. Do you see that? So because she's outside the W circle does not mean definitely she's in the L circle. So anyway, that's invalid. And by the way, at the bottom, if you did it with a truth table, you can, you weren't supposed to, but I just for practice, if you want to do the argument in truth table form, because of this right here, you can also see in agreement, yep, that's an invalid argument. Yeah, I like the truth tables better too, but the Euler diagrams can get you an answer real quickly. A lot less ink, but you're right. I kind of like the no stone unturned, which is what the truth table is. Boy, you've got every single possibility taken care of. Yeah. So anyway, that's number 20. By the way, to agree with you some more, Garrett, the thing I don't like about using Euler diagrams is you never quite know if you've drawn enough circles or tried enough possibilities. Whereas the truth table, you have covered every single scenario. You don't have to worry about, did I do enough? You've got it all. So I agree with you. I prefer, if I was doing a very important document, I would use a truth table technique because it's just more thorough. How about the reverse of that, number 18? Okay, let's look at number 18. Do I have the right problem? Okay. Which of the following are tautologies? So what you have to do is do the truth tables. So, I mean, here, okay, so here's, over here on the left, this is just our, our standard beginning point over here. Just a standard PQ setup. So here's the part A. P and not P. Remember, how does and work? True only when they're both true. Well, they're not, none of, so that's a doggone contradiction. So that's out. How about B? Ta-da! When you do P or not P, remember the rule for or is only false when both are false. Well, you know what? Yeah, so never are they both false. So there's your answer. The other, this one, the part C didn't make it. It's TFFT. So the answer to this question is B is the only one that turns out. Yeah, you got to do, basically you got to do them all three. Yep. And you never know. There might be a time when I give you a multiple choice question where I say, answer all that are correct. Maybe two of them are tautologies and one of them is not. So that sometimes can happen too, where I'll say, put all correct answers down or something like that. I can't think of the exact wording, but something to that effect. And you know, Garrett, it just hit me. Something I didn't do on this in this truth table that maybe would have helped is maybe I should have made a not P column here in the beginning. And then it would just be what? The opposite of the P column. And then you could have looked at, you know, this column and this column when you were doing this table. You know what I mean? So I maybe should have listed a not P. So anyway. Number 12, sure. Okay, so number 12, is the following statement true or false? If 2 plus 2 equals 5, then 2 times 3 equals 6. Well, you and I both know that 2 plus 2 is not equal to 5. So that's why I put a false there. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. So now the question is, in if-then form, what happens when you have an if false then true? Do you remember how that goes? Whoops. Sorry about that. How that goes is, you know, if you have P, Q, true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. And then if you do if P then Q, do you remember how that works? This is the only one that's false, right? The other three are true. Well, which one are we doing? This one. If false, then true. So do you see? So that's why that statement is true. Because it's ironic, but when an if then starts off with a false, it's true. So it's like saying, if pigs fly, then I'll give you $1 million when you complete your test. Well, last we checked, pigs don't fly. So whatever I follow that up with, I mean, it's safe. You know, the only time I gave you a promise is if pigs fly. Well, if pigs don't fly, well, then it's an empty promise. It's full of baloney. Yeah, that's true. So I can't think of, do you have another example we want to look at? Let's see, I'm trying to look in the book here. And I'll be honest, you were talking about more complicated truth tables. Oh, like 13. Let's look at 13. There's probably what you're talking about, right? So where it says construct a truth table for that statement, that's probably what you meant by a more complicated one. Okay, so what you have to do is break this down into pieces, right? So first, you got two letters, PQ, so set up your PQ, standard setup. Then in parentheses, you have an if P then Q, and you can see I set up a column for that right here. And then in the other set of parentheses, we have that thing. And then the last thing is we have to combine them with an if and only if, with a biconditional. So just do it a step at a time. Do the first set of parentheses first, then do the second set of parentheses, and then bring them together. Final answer, in this case, is actually a tautology, isn't it? So like anything, more complicated is just what? Small parts put together. And that's the way you need to think about it and attack it. If you try to do everything at once, it's a pile of garbage. But if you take it piece by piece, it works it just follows the rules. Where some people get a little mixed up on a problem like this is they don't break it into parts, and then they don't know which thing to do first and which to do next. And we discussed that at least on this problem. But just a chunk at a time, follow the rules, and smile, because the rules always work. So get a smiley face in there. Yeah, as you can tell, I have just become bald. No, yeah, it's a self-portrait. You're right. I took that with my camera. Yeah, isn't it? I agree. I just got that camera, and boy, I'm impressed too. Well, Garrett, I didn't realize this has worked out very well, but just, I don't know where everybody else is. But I'm glad we had the. I'm glad we. I don't know. This is a good electronic discussion to have. Yeah, makes sense. I hope you do well in the test too. Um, and I think the fact that we're talking these things through, really, in effect, that's the kind of explanation would be awesome to give on extra credit. Yeah. Well, by the way, just so you know, I'm not real fussy. You can express it. I realize it's hard, but I mean, any words you come up with, that your words might be more effective than mine. In fact, often students do a better job. So just consider it in the future. By the way, I did get I got your notebook. Appreciate that you got it in nice and early. I have not corrected them yet, but I did get yours. Good, good. By the way, Garrett, another thing you can do for extra credit hints, you know how I also link to that external website? If you look on that external website, some examples I give, if you look at the far right column, really what you have there is an explanation, and that would actually give you some hints. So, I mean, I don't want you to do the same problem, obviously, but you can get an idea of how to explain some of that stuff. You know what I mean? Are you? Do you know what I mean by the external website? Yeah. Anyway, if you go to that extra website, I don't have very many examples there, but there are a few. And if you look, because it's at the website and I can't talk, I wrote out some explanations over there, and yeah, that should help you maybe for next time. Yep, it's all multiple choice and true false. I don't know if you saw, but it's longer. Well, I think we had like 16 questions on the first chapter test. This time there's 26. And instead of an hour, I'm giving everybody 100 minutes. So an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, that it shouldn't take that long, but I believe I've given some leeway there, but I know each person's a little different. So I'm not trying to make judgments. But so plan a little more, plan some more time. Get ready for taking a longer test. Yeah, I would think so. But some of them, like, for example, the problem on the screen, if I asked you to work it out and get the final answer, TTTT, you might have to take a piece of paper out and it might take you for maybe 5 minutes. So, but you're right. Most of them are, the true false, they should be quick or quicker. So my hope is that I haven't written a test that will be a real big time constraint. I don't think it should work out. Are the Marlins playing the Brewers tomorrow? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. So in other words, okay. That's interesting. I didn't realize the Marlins were in town. Well, have a good time at the game, and I hope I don't spoil it for you with the test. Of course, you can also, take the test on Saturday too. Yeah, so it's a Friday game. Gotcha. Gotcha. The Ponies in Arlington. So where do you do that? At Potawatomi? Or do you just do it online, or how do you do that? Oh, head down. I got you. Go down to Chicago. Okay, got it. Yeah, and you living in what? As I recall, you're in Racine, so you're at least not that far away. Got it. Yep. Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, I would agree with you. It'd be good to get the test done first, and then you could relax more. Okay, Garrett. It was. I enjoyed spending some time with you tonight. Take care. Good night. Okay, well, there's nobody left in this room, so I'm going to stop the broadcast. Don't forget, if you want to contact me with questions, email, call me, text message. I'm game. If I mean, unless I'm sleeping, I will do my best to give you some guidance. Have a good evening.